Air travel can damage your health. The links between flying and deep vein thrombosis in passengers is well known. But now there are fears for the health of pilots. A government committee is meeting tomorrow to investigate reports that pilots and cabin crew are being poisoned. Crews believe the air they breathe can be contaminated by chemicals from engine oils, and they accuse the government of ignoring the problem and downplaying the risks. Our science correspondent Julian Rush has seen new scientific evidence that suggests pilots have been contaminated by organophosphates.
The first officer smelt fumes and discussed with the captain.
Was conscious throughout, if incoherent.
Strong smell of burning.
First officer started to feel
Blood
lightheaded.
tests confirmed significant exposure to pyrolyzed engine oil ingredients.
Both flight crew felt abnormal.
The smell's a so-called wet sock, a sort of unpleasant, musty smell. It's very distinctive. I mean, everybody talks about it. Flying's fun, there's no question about it. But there's also reluctance to go flying because you think you've got to be in this gas chamber for 10 hours.
Pilots say they fear for their jobs if they speak out. Dozens are being declared medically unfit to fly after showing symptoms of neurological problems. The pilots' union BALPA has now collected anonymous reports of nearly 800 incidents of fumes or smells in the cockpit over the past 11 years. The top suspect is the oil used in many aircraft engines. It contains a chemical anti-wearing agent, tricresyl phosphate, or TCP. It's an organophosphate similar to many pesticides and to sheep dip, which has long been known to poison farmers.
Acute exposures, you get headache, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, a lot of other symptoms. And longer-term chronic exposure, folks complain of cognitive deficits, trouble concentrating, irritability, and so on and so forth.
2 planes figure prominently in the reports of fumes and sick pilots, the British Aerospace 146 and Boeing's 757. Both companies have ordered engine modifications and changed maintenance procedures to tackle the issue. The airlines admit incidents of smoke and fumes do happen, but they say there's no evidence they cause persistent health effects. But pilots are increasingly concerned that the real problem is low-level day-to-day exposure. The air to the cockpit contaminated with TCP at levels too low to smell, but which can build up in the body to cause long-term medical damage.
I want you to repeat after me.
Their fears appear to be confirmed by the results of psychological and neurological tests on 18 757 and 146 pilots carried out for the government's Committee on Toxicity.
5, 9, 12, 15.
Done by a leading researcher at University College London, the results reveal all 18 pilots had similar neurological impairment, with poor performance in mental flexibility, information processing and attention and concentration. And the researcher has told the committee,
the profile of cognitive deficits cannot be attributed to factors such as mood disorder, malingering or chance, and are of obvious concern to flight safety.
The tests don't prove a link to contaminated air, but some of the pilots also had blood and body fat tests for TCP. Several proved positive, including the pilot we spoke to.
I was naturally very alarmed when I found out the results. I thought, this is unbelievable. Everybody had the same. It shocked me, deeply shocked me. And to me, that's the proof of the thing, really, because you can't argue with figures, really.
So how does oil from the engines get into the cockpit? Well, every airliner flying today gets fresh air in the same way. It's drawn in through the engines, where the spinning turbines compress and heat the thin atmosphere. A small proportion of the hot compressed air is bled off to feed the aircraft's air conditioning system, which is usually around a 50-50 mix of fresh and recycled air. But the fresh air is not normally filtered, so any contamination from leaking oils can form a fine, potentially toxic mist. Worried pilots recently sent flight deck air supply dust filters from British 757s to be tested in Canada. All 4 showed signs of TCP, as did swabs taken from the cabin walls of 757s. That evidence too is before the committee.
Mainly they've got to take it seriously. They have got to accept the evidence they've been given, that there appears to be a genuine problem. They need to address it. Roll their sleeves up and get on and find a solution. Our pilots are losing their licences on medical grounds because the CAA and various government departments are doing nothing about it.
Doing something would mean funding proper research that's not yet been done, even though the issue was first raised 8 years ago. research that would benefit from new genetic knowledge that some people are more susceptible than others to organophosphates.
A lot of research needs to be done, but it's pretty straightforward. You can lay out what needs to be done in large part. One, we need biomarkers of exposure and determine for certain whether an individual has or hasn't been exposed. And it certainly won't hurt to have real-time monitoring on board to know if there's been an event, if tricrystal phosphate has come in through the bleed air.
No airline nor the Civil Aviation Authority would be interviewed, but all told us health and safety was their top priority. In a sign perhaps that plane makers realise there's a problem, Boeing's latest 787 Dreamliner will be the first not to suck in air through the engines. New technologies, they say, drove the decision, not fears of litigation.
Julian Rush, on the More 4 News flight deck tonight, Captain Sarah Smith.
Thanks, John. And tonight we've got a special report.